Donald Trump está intentando huir de su pasado. Pero cada paso que da, señores, cada intento de escapar de este escándalo, solo lo hunde más. Y literalmente eso quedó más que claro hoy. Cuando el presidente, tras ser acorralado por sus propias mentiras sobre el caso de Jeffrey Epstein, decidió hacer lo único que sabe hacer en estas situaciones: salir corriendo de la sala, evitar a los periodistas como si estuviese escapando de la justicia. Todo esto ocurrió mientras Trump daba un discurso sobre su nuevo y peligrosísimo proyecto de ley relacionado con criptomonedas. Y sinceramente, la forma en la cual empezó su intervención ya era un chiste, una humillación pública que se vuelve aún más evidente cuando uno ve la comparación entre estos dos clips.
Yeah, we worked hard. It's a very important act, the Genius Act. They named it after me, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you. This is a hell of an act. But he spoke totally fluent Japanese. I said, that's very impressive. And he was introducing me to Mr. Honda. I said, oh, are you in the car business? He goes, yes. I said, you're a very rich man. And then he said, Mr. Toyota, right? Toyota. And I said, what business are you in? Let me guess. He said, cars. He was my interpreter. And I was so impressed. And I was getting ready to leave. He said, sir, I'd like to run for the United States Senate. I said, where are you from? He said, Tennessee. I said, well, I love Tennessee, but do they know you there? No, but if you endorse me, I'll win, right? They didn't want to be tariffed there. So it's amazing. No, we're not going to let the dollar slide. If we have a smart president, you're never going to let the dollar slide. If you have a dummy, that could happen. Like the last one, he would, if you ever asked him about the dollar sliding, he would have no idea. But we can't let that ever happen again.
Ahí lo tienen. Empieza proclamándose como un genio y termina diciendo disparates como Mr. Honda o Team Apple. Donald Trump no solo está dañando la democracia, sino que también está destruyendo la credibilidad de los Estados Unidos en el escenario internacional. Literalmente, amigos, Estados Unidos tiene un presidente que sigue publicando tonterías a medianoche, que parece estar colapsando mentalmente y físicamente ante nuestros ojos, y ni siquiera se da cuenta del nivel de vergüenza que genera esto. Por si fuese poco, en medio de todo este colapso, comenzó a lanzar elogios a Mike Johnson, congresista que paradójicamente, ¿no?, está pidiendo que se publiquen los archivos de Epstein.
Come through, right, JD? Also, Speaker Mike Johnson. He's unbelievable. He's an unbelievable. I mean, if you go by what we're doing, if you keep at this pace, you can't keep it up for another 200 days. But I will tell you this, if you keep up this pace for another week, you go down as the greatest speaker in the House in history. So one more week. One more week. Who needs Tip O'Neill? Who needs Tip O'Neill? He's better looking than Tip O'Neill, too. But no, he's been going at a fervent pace. Would you say that's right? Your wife probably says, you are crazy. You've been aging beautifully at front. He's an amazing speaker, a great leader, and everybody likes him.
O sea, es en serio, señores, Donald Trump tuvo que elogiar a alguien que está exigiendo exactamente lo que él intenta bloquear. Pero claro, según él, su gobierno logró muchísimo, ¿no? Solo aprobaron 2 leyes, literalmente, ¿no? 2 leyes, y una de ellas fue renombrar un cuerpo de agua. Felicidades, señor presidente. Ahora están impulsando una legislación que favorece descaradamente a los donantes de criptomonedas, quienes, por cierto, fueron los que más dinero donaron en las elecciones pasadas, incluyendo a campañas presidenciales. Y por si no lo sabían, Donald Trump está ganando más dinero que cualquier político en la historia a través de su moneda digital. Una verdadera estafa con traje político. Logros. El único logro real ha sido bloquear los archivos de Epstein, algo que quedó clarísimo cuando prefirió huir de la prensa en vez de responder preguntas incómodas.
Mr. President, Mr. President, why not go further than just unsealing this?
Mr. President, did you send that letter? Release the full file?
No puede con la presión, no puede enfrentarla. Sabe que cualquier cosa que diga va a terminar empeorando las cosas. Anoche intentó burlarse diciendo que no hace garabatos, solo para que minutos después saliera a la luz al menos 10 dibujos que él mismo hizo y subastó. Subastas benéficas, supuestamente, ¿no? Pues bueno, no me sorprendería que se haya quedado con algo de ese dinero. Donald Trump ya no puede inventar más conspiraciones. Ya no puede echarle la culpa a Obama, a Biden ni a Hillary Clinton. Está atrapado y MAGA está furioso. La presión para publicar estos archivos no hace nada más comentar. Pero bueno, como ya vimos, su solución es siempre la misma: dar órdenes vacías. Le pidió a Van Bondi que publique los supuestos documentos del gran jurado. Como si eso sirviese de algo. Incluso su portavoz Caroline Leavitt dijo que todo está detenido por un juez. Ahora me pregunto, ¿desde cuándo su administración respeta lo que dice un juez? Siempre han hecho lo contrario. Y eso solo nos confirma lo que muchos ya sabemos, que la corrupción está descontrolada. Por suerte, aún hay figuras, como la congresista Jasmine Crockett, que no están bajando los brazos y siguen exigiendo que se le rinda cuentas al presidente, tal y como se ve en este fragmento.
Today, Charlie Kirk joined the growing chorus of right-wing podcast bros complaining about Trump's lack of transparency about the Epstein files, just hours after the president called them past supporters and weaklings falling for what he called a Democratic hoax. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas, serves on the Judiciary Committee, where Democrats are calling for Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify about Epstein. She joins me now. Well, Congresswoman, what do you make of all this?
I mean, it's interesting to hear the right explain why it is that they want to hear. I want to hear because clearly you got something to hide, Mr. President. So that's why I want to hear. I want the swamp, right, to be drained, okay? Listen, let me use their language. We know that he had this ongoing relationship with Epstein. They were basically like besties. We know that there are allegations that a lot of the recruitment took place down at Mar-a-Lago. We know that there are even young ladies that said that they were sexually abused and or sexually assaulted. We know that this is someone who has been found liable of sexual abuse by a jury of his peers. So, I mean, this is also a guy who seemingly doesn't really necessarily care if somebody engages in these types of activities. So I know he's got something to hide. That's the only reason it's not out there. If this had anything to do with Democrats, baby, it would have been on day one. That promise would have been fulfilled. But he wanted access to those files, and he wanted to see how bad it looked for him. And unfortunately, after having a glimpse, I think he's decided that he just wants to move on and talk about something else.
So I just want to be clear. By the way, I have no idea. Everything you recited there is true, including the allegation you said there's a woman of age, I should note, who talked about being introduced to Trump by Jeffrey Epstein and then being groped by Trump against, non-consensually. That was reported out, talked to the press and the Guardian. So I want to be clear about that. She was of age. She was, I think, 23 at the time. She was a model. So all those things that you listed there are facts, their association. Him being found liable of what was the term they used? Sexual assault, I guess, in that civil jury. Allegations against him, of course. All of that's established. Well, what you're saying is you think there actually is something. I mean, I have no idea. You think there's something in the file that incriminates him.
I do. Listen, this guy isn't above board. I mean, I think you're kidding yourself if you believe that he is. So, no, I absolutely believe that if he thought for just 2 seconds he could hurt anybody but himself, then absolutely we would have the files. And so it does look a little murky. I think it is why the Democrats are all on board because, this is a guy who has made his own admissions. If you remember the tape where he talked about groping women, right? So, honestly, I think that his loyalists will stay with him regardless. This is a guy who said he could go out and kill somebody and they would still be with him. So I'm sure they would come up with an excuse for why it's okay for him to maybe be involved in the Epstein files. But they want to know about everybody else. They believe that there's so many Democrats that are in this, and that's why it is that they want to see it. But it's interesting, while they are taking away health care, while they are taking away farmers' access to be able to do what they do, which is to make money, while they are getting rid of people's food access, and while inflation is on the rise, and while this tariff war is not reducing anybody's prices for anything, it's amazing that this is the thing that has stirred them up. But I'm going to let them stir. Stir, stir, stir.
I should note that the civil jury found sexual abuse was the finding of that civil jury. I want to play for you what the committee chair of Judiciary, Jim Jordan, was saying about the possibility of bringing some of the relevant principals here, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, before that Judiciary Committee to explain themselves. Take a listen.
I have complete confidence in President Trump and his team. We've been working on this prior to this whole Epstein issue this last week and a half. But there's an annual trek that the Attorney General, and you know this, Chris, the Attorney General and the Deputy Director make to Capitol Hill in front of the Judiciary Committee.
So it sounds like he's going to wait until that annual testimony, but they are going to have to come and talk to your committee at some point.
I guess. I mean, listen, Chris, we are in month 7. You know, like I know, that we are on recess in August. So we got about 3 months, right? I mean, you know, they're not rushing to come and see us. And I wonder why. They seem to always be a little intimidated, specifically in judiciary, when it comes to judiciary Dems and how it is that we are able to frame our questions and get information out, or highlight the fact that they are basically just hypocrites. I don't anticipate that Pam Bondi would be a forthright witness in front of us. And I think she probably is concerned as well, knowing that there are real attorneys on this committee. She may be afraid of stepping into a little bit of poo with some of her answers.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sits on the Judiciary Committee. We'll see if they get a chance to talk to anyone. Appreciate you coming on.
Por eso, señores, es el momento en el que todos los demócratas y hasta también republicanos decentes comiencen a luchar por la verdad. Porque este escándalo no es solo político, es una cuestión de justicia y de clase. Ahora bien, amigos, hablando un poco de justicia, quiero que hablemos de Emil Pov, el polémico nominado por Trump para la Corte de Apelaciones. Y es que esta nominación literalmente ha encendido todas las alarmas, señores. Y no solo por la falta total de experiencia judicial que tiene este señor, sino porque está directamente vinculado a la purga de fiscales del Departamento de Justicia que investigaban el asalto al Capitolio. Y sí, señores, también intentó manipular un caso criminal contra un alcalde demócrata. ¿Coincidencia? Lo dudo mucho.
NBC's Ryan Nobles is on Capitol Hill for us. Also with me, former federal judge and president of Dickinson College, John E. Jones, who signed on to a letter along with 75 judges urging the Senate not to advance that nomination. Ryan, what the heck happened there?
Well, Chris, this basically was the Democrats doing everything they possibly can to slow down what will ultimately be an inevitable conclusion. Emil Bovee has the support of Senate Republicans to ultimately earn this lifetime appointment, but Democrats are vehemently opposed to his pick for a wide range of reasons. So they attempted to slow down this process by essentially filibustering this judicial hearing to try and prevent a vote on the nomination. And then when Republicans just decided to sidestep all of their attempts to slow the process down and just vote right away, they got up and left en masse, attempting to try and prevent a quorum from being held so that the vote could ultimately be reported. Now, Republicans believe that this vote has gone through, that it was a 12-0 vote. It will now head to the Senate floor for a final call. But Democrats argue that they did not go through this process the correct way. So they've now appealed to the Senate parliamentarian to make an official ruling as to whether or not this nomination has been reported out. But keep in mind, Chris, that even if the parliamentarian rules in the Democrats' favor, it's just going to go back to the committee, and the Republicans are going to continue to hold their ground until eventually Democrats give up and they get this particular nominee voted out and reported to the Senate floor. But Democrats, they want more. They want to hear from a whistleblower who's talked about Bovey's time in the Department of Justice, the role that he has played in removing people who prosecuted the January 6th defendants out and pushing them out of the Department of Justice. They want to hear from that whistleblower in an open hearing. At this point, Republicans have rejected calling that individual as a witness. So Democrats have not given up the fight here, but it is important to point out that ultimately Bovey looks to be headed toward confirmation. Chris.
So, Judge, I want to get to your letter to the Senate in a moment, but first, what do you make of the Democrats' reaction to being denied hearing from a DOJ whistleblower who apparently has a lot to say about Emil Bovey's tenure at the department?
Well, I watched the hearing this morning, Chris, and it wasn't exactly profiles in courage from the standpoint of the majority of the committee. I think fairly the whistleblower should be heard, but there are other issues besides the whistleblower, which he's tended to garner some focus. But I think, you know, having served on the federal bench, and I was designated to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals on a number of occasions. I sat with that court. I have an idea what makes a good judge. I just believe, as the other signatories to that letter do, that he is singularly, Mr. Bovey is singularly unqualified to sit on that very distinguished appellate court. They're in much question in our minds. So it's not just the whistleblower, but it's a lot of other things as well.
Well, the letter you signed on to with those other former federal judges argues that advancing the nomination would set a dangerous precedent. I want to read from the letter. It says, the Senate's role in providing advice and consent is not ceremonial. It is a safeguard against precisely this kind of erosion. Can you go a little further? Tell us what you mean by that erosion.
Well, look at what's happening now in the confirmation process, and echoing what Senator Booker said today in an attempt to implement a rule and continue debate. You're seeing things ram through. Now, is it a question of the president looking over the shoulder of the Republican senators or a lack of courage? I don't know what, but you know, you have now a letter with hundreds and hundreds of Department of Justice former employees, prosecutors, the judges who signed along with me the letter, all those things that were introduced in the record, and it's like it didn't even happen. And we didn't do this in a fanciful way or in a way, you know, just to make a point. We truly believe that this individual is unfit to be a judge. Now, you would think that there would be a duty of inquiry on the part of the committee to talk to some of the folks, you know, who signed these letters and to understand better why this opposition has arisen. I'm just struck by the unnecessary speed of the process, which could only, in my view, and I'm not naive about politics, believe me, but it can only be attributable to a desire to just ram this thing through before something else develops that could be problematic for this nominee.
Well, let me read from that other letter you mentioned. 900 former DOJ officials warning against Bovey's nomination, saying he had disgraced the department. Quote, we are all alarmed by DOJ leadership's recent deviations from constitutional principles and institutional guardrails. We also share a grave concern over the senseless attacks on dedicated career employees who are the backbone of the department. Emil Bovey has been a leader in this assault. If he gets a lifetime appointment, what do you see as the larger ripple effect here?
Well, the larger ripple effect is that nominees who heretofore, before this administration, would have been not just not confirmed, but their nominations would have been withdrawn, now come to the fore and very likely at the will of the president are going to be rammed through, which again goes to the point you just made that was in the letter. That advice and consent is not something ephemeral or that is to be lightly taken, but it is a real responsibility. And Chris, I'll tell you something else. You know, there's been a lot said about the prosecution of Mayor Adams in New York, and the fact of the matter is that what you need to know about that is that Mr. Bovee and his colleagues wanted to basically have the United States drop that prosecution, but without prejudice, meaning that the sword of Damocles would be above the mayor's head, and if he, quite clearly, if he didn't toe the line and do the immigration things the administration wanted, they could re-prosecute him. Now, the judge wouldn't allow that ultimately, but that gives lie to their claim that that prosecution that was pulled down was highly irregular. That is not the proper use of the Department of Justice. And I shudder to think, as we go forward, with the incalculable damage that's been done, and all these folks have been fired from January 6th and the Adams prosecution, you know, what's going to happen here? This is a very, very difficult course, I think, that we've chosen from both a judicial and a prosecutorial standpoint.
Former Judge John Jones, thank you.
Lo que acabamos de ver, señores, es una bomba. Porque por un lado tenemos a los demócratas tratando de frenar la nominación utilizando cada herramienta legislativa posible. ¿Por qué? Porque saben que Emil Boff no es un simple candidato polémico, es una ficha clave en una estrategia mucho más grande. Debilitar a los fiscales que se atrevieron a investigar a Trump y a sus aliados tras el 6 de enero. Pero lo que más indigna es cómo los republicanos, en lugar de escuchar a un denunciante del propio Departamento de Justicia que tiene pruebas sobre las acciones de Boff, simplemente decidieron ignorarla. Ni siquiera quieren que testifique. ¿Por qué tanto miedo a que se sepa la verdad? Eso no es todo, porque más de 900 ex empleados del Departamento de Justicia tuvieron que firmar una carta donde acusan a Emil Boff de haber dañado profundamente la integridad del departamento. Hablamos de 900 personas, amigos. Y por si fuese poco, 75 ex jueces federales también firmaron otra carta diciendo que Emil Boff está singularmente no calificado. O sea que ni uno solo de sus colegas cree que está preparado para este cargo. Y aún así, lo quieren confirmar. Aquí hay algo mucho más grande que solo una nominación judicial. Estamos viendo el manual trumpista aplicado una vez más. Colocar a personas leales en una posición clave, sin importar su competencia, sin importar si es que están preparados. Todo esto para que nadie lo detenga legalmente. Este tipo de nombramientos no son inocentes, es como una inversión a largo plazo en impunidad. Y ojo con ese dato, porque según el juez John Jones, Emil Boff presionó para que se retiraran cargos criminales contra el alcalde Eric Adams, pero con una trampa. Querían retirarlos sin prejuicio, es decir, con la posibilidad de reactivarlo luego si es que el alcalde no se alineaba con las políticas migratorias de Trump. Una amenaza disfrazada de legalidad. Es prácticamente como utilizar el sistema judicial como un arma política. Esta nominación no solo es preocupante porque es muy peligrosa. Estamos viendo cómo se está erosionando el principio básico de la independencia judicial, señores. Si se deja pasar esta situación, ¿qué sigue? ¿Más jueces sin experiencia, pero con lealtad a Trump? ¿Un sistema judicial convertido en un brazo político para mantener el gobierno? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias, señores, por quedarse hasta el final de este video. Recuerden, déjenme su like, compartan este video y suscríbanse a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.